Hey, that was a really cool intro.
Thank you. Happy Sunday. And welcome back to another edition of Chime In Live. Today is a very special day. Yesterday, worldwide, we celebrated Emancipation Day. And tomorrow, which is August 3rd, is the first Monday of August. Grenada celebrates Emancipation Day, and they do so with a lot of cultural activities throughout the island and online. Well, now everything is virtually online. So I just wanted to say Happy Emancipation Day to all of my fellow Grenadians and all of the other Caribbean nations and regions and worldwide that is celebrating the representation of the abolishment of slavery. So there we go. Today we have two amazing guests, which you're going to meet a little bit later, that is talking about their journey from being published authors to script writers and filmmakers. So, and these are award-winning filmmakers. So I am so psyched. I get very excited whenever I'm in the company of esteemed filmmakers. Molly is laughing, so you're going to meet her in a few. But we have so much things to discuss. And one more thing, I'm going to do a shameless plug right now because I am super, super excited. You see me have the t-shirt on today. I can't save it anymore, but we are going virtual, or we're having a hybrid festival from October 30th to November 3rd. So Grenada, the 𝗠𝗏𝗃𝗰𝗵𝗶𝗶𝗃 Film Festival will be going virtual then. And yay, we're excited. We are so thrilled because we spent the last several months going through a new strategy based on the whole thing with COVID, because we were right at the cusp of coming to Grenada in May, and then COVID happened. So my team and I are finally in a comfortable space right now, so we're happy to announce the launch. But I will give more information. If people are interested, please follow us on all the social platforms at 𝗠𝗏𝗃𝗰𝗵𝗶𝗶𝗃 Film Festival. You can check out our website, 𝗠𝗏𝗃𝗰𝗵𝗶𝗃 Film Festival, for details, which will be rolling out in the next few days. But like I said before, I can't wait. We have some amazing people today, and it's about them. And for me, learning as a novice writer, unpublished author, I'm jealous. But today, I am so jealous. I want to have a book too. I'm curious to find out your journeys and how you started and how you got to this point. But before we do, take 60 seconds or however long you want to take and give the people out there who are viewing in a little insight as to who you are. So we can start with my fellow daughter of the soil. I wanted to use that so badly. Oh my God. My fellow sister of the soil.
Absolutely, daughter of the dust.
Molly, I wanted to use that so badly, that phrase. So I am so happy I finally found you that I can definitely share that. So Molly, introduce yourself to the people out there.
I am Molly 𝗠𝗏𝗃𝗃. I was born in Grenada, I think St. George's, though I was raised in Cafe St. Andrews. My mom and my biological father are both from Grenada. Came here when I was 11 and went through all of the schooling. At 31, I published my first book, which is poetry. And almost immediately after it was published, I kind of figured, okay, now what? Because, you set up a goal for yourself and you finally hit it, and now what? And I went to film school. I thought, branch out from writing is one way of storytelling that you could segue into film. I'm married. I've been married for about 8 years. I have one son, and I'm currently living in Brooklyn, New York, and my latest film is actually on iTunes now and soon to be on Amazon next week. So it's titled Humanity Last, Refugees Still Hope. It's about the refugee crisis facing us now, focused in Calais and the UK border. So very excited about it. Happy to check it out. Cleve?
Hey, my name is Cleve.
Yeah, I just love it. We just driving. So before Cleve
Right.
can go, I want to say Cleve
sorry.
is. I wanted to say because I love the phrase, right? You are a multi-talented storyteller. Is that the right phrase?
That's good enough. I say multimedia storyteller because I have to have.
Multimedia storyteller. I wanted to use that.
So my trip was kind of the inverse of yours. Like I started off in theater, and from there I started writing plays and screenplays, and then I wrote a novel, Full-Blood Half-Breed, which is Penguin Random House. Anyway, so for me, and we'll talk about screenplays. The reason why I made the switch from screenplays and plays to sort of a big novel was because a screenplay is a very specific thing, right? And I wanted to tell I was overwriting my screenplays because I really wanted to write something else. So that's me, I guess.
Awesome. And this is like the perfect timing because right now we're in this weird space in the world where Black voices, Black stories matter so much, and it's something that is to the forefront. You're having more and more, not just corporations, but there is a demand for these stories, and I think they're finally recognizing that they have something to say.
Right?
They have something to say, and the stories are also valuable to earn these corporations. So for each of you, how important is representation as far as the work that you are drawn to and the stories that you're telling? So we can start with you, Molly.
Okay, that I always figured I would know what to say if I ever got asked that question. I was at a writer's roundtable once, and one of the first things they ask is, do you think that a person that is not of color can write stories accurately and depicting the real struggles of people of color? And I had to answer no, because no matter how empathetic you are, I think there's always going to be a little bit of a disconnect, something that gets lost in translation. So I think representation is key, and throughout history we have existed. So it's not like we just suddenly arrived here, people of color. But yet still, you see so very few are being represented throughout history and even currently. Even last night I was actually having a discussion with my son about this because he had just binge watched Game of Thrones and wondering why there was so little at the very end of it. And he used the term whitewash. And I mean, what do you say? I just had to kind of shrug.
Exactly. And your cousin said, your cousin Cislin, Julian, she's like, hey, Molly's my cousin.
See, my cousins use a whole different type of
dialogue.
We're from the South of America's South, so we have that thing.
And what would your saying be, please?
Say again?
Yeah.
What would your cousin say? Like, you say, hey, my cousin.
Okay, now I should be able to hear you better, but I'm going to be really hot.
How would you introduce your cousin if you happen to see your cousin after a long time?
Yes. Where is she?
Hear me?
Cleve?
My cousin's not up there.
So, yeah, I actually. So, Cleve, what about representation to you? What does that mean, and what does that resonate?
Something Molly just said, she just touched on, is exactly why I wrote Full-Blood Half-Breed. Because I grew up reading speculative fiction, like comic books and Tolkien and all that stuff. And, you know, we weren't in it. And I was like, so when I, you know, I wanted to write something, when I decided I wanted to write a novel, I definitely wanted to write something, you know, I love that medieval sort of European romanticized stuff. You know, we all know what it wasn't what we romanticized it to be, but the romantic notion of it is something that's always spoke to me. You know, being chivalrous, standing up for people who can't stand up for themselves, having a suit of armor, and a big ass sword. And if you're talking about speculative fiction, then you know you have to have a magic sword. So when I specifically designed this world around sort of speaking to the ethnicity of my son. So when it started off, he was just going to be, you know, he was going to be me. He was going to be this, you know, black kid. But my son is African American, and he's also a bunch of European shit too. So for me, he sort of represents the best of America, right? When you clear away all the crap, America's great because, well, the reason why America is a great country is because it's every country, right? And if we were to embrace that and stop fighting against it, we would be great. Anyway, so this whole medieval world that I created is all about representation, right? So so it's almost like a medieval, to me, it's like a medieval Manhattan, right? So you've got uptown, you've got you know people of African descent, except they would be of like Germanic descent in this world. Anyway, I'm not going to go into all that. But anyway, speaking directly to your point about representation, yes, God, we need to see ourselves. I am so, you know, okay, I'm going to tell it myself. All right, so when I was watching Star Wars, the new one, you know, I'm just talking to you. Talk about representation. It's really got me excited. So, so the new character Finn, right? So I'm watching Star Wars, and this is, you know, the first movie that actually affected my life. You can probably tell I'm kind of a geek. So, and then the black hero comes on, and you know, I was with my little black son, and I was kind of like, we're in Star Wars now, you know, and not just like as an afterthought, like you know, even though Billy D. Williams did a great job, but you know, this guy comes in and he's like, you know, and he's badass.
Yeah.
And you know, he's got his natural though.
It helps.
You know. So speaking of Lando Calrissian, you know, I gotta say, I think the guy who, I can't remember his name, Donald Glover, his Lando is the shit, right?
Absolutely.
They should spin that Han Solo movie off into a Lando movie, in my opinion. You know? But anyway,
so we know where your excitement lies because you actually dropped that.
Lando was the suavest all.
Yeah. What he said.
Oh, hey, my cousin nephew. I'm sorry.
Oh, your cousin.
I know, but see, my mind is all over the place. So back in the day, my sister used to say I'm a Renaissance man, right? Because I do a lot of different stuff. But I think now they just say, oh, he has ADHD. That's why he can't focus on one thing.
No, you put it like how I tell my sister all the time. I'm just a creative.
That's right.
Period.
That's right. So that's why I had to come up with the generic term like multimedia storyteller. Because I kind of do this, I do that.
Rolls off the tongue, please.
Say one more time.
Rolls off the tongue. I like it.
Yes. Oh, thank you.
Yes. So I can see the type of energy that we have today, and I'm so looking forward to it because I love that kind of thing where we can just flow because that's what creativity is about. And in our world, there are some moments where we are so intense, but then there are times that we just have to free up and have fun. and allow our creativity to expand, and that's what we need. 𝗃𝗲, I am so looking forward to reading your book, because for me, that's not necessarily my genre of films or things to read, but I am excited to dive into it and learn a little bit more. So tell me about what that looks like for you, getting into that whole fantasy realm, because I know there is a lot of, traditionally in the Caribbean, there is a lot of stories that can be told and developed into really wonderful films that we learned traditionally throughout our heritage and our culture. Like in Grenada and out of the Caribbean, we have things like the 𝗟𝗵𝗆 stories and the folklore stories, I should say. And I know there is a push right now to tell more of the folklore stories, which kind of parallel worlds that you are writing about. So tell me about that genre a little bit more.
Oh, this genre is blowing up for people of color. It has been for a while, especially women of color. There's one of my favorite authors. I should have wrote her name down. When I'm on the spot, I can never remember anything. Oh, Nora Jemisin is her name. N.K. Jemisin. She writes this really cool, it's like succulent, juicy fantasy. And if you haven't, oh my God, if you haven't read, well, anyway, I'm gonna stick with her for a while. So she's, but it's great because it's coming from several different perspectives, right? So she's like me. She was this geek who grew up, watching Star Trek and watching this shit stuff and saying, wondering where are we in all this? Like, if you look at those movies, it's like, not many of us, if any, make it into the future, let alone space. So, but she writes this really, it's not your typical sword and sorcery stuff, which is what makes it great. Like, so for me, my son, his name is Paladin, which means, it's a knight. The Paladins were the original knights in shining armor, because I have, that sort of, I like the idea of people standing up for the less. I don't want to say fortunate.
Underrepresented.
Privileged. Right? Because what is fortunate but a matter of privilege? You were fortunate enough to be born into a certain amount of privilege, and most of us haven't. It took me. I had to learn that even as a black male, I have privilege. My sister was treated differently than I was, and she played by the rules, right?
Oh.
And I didn't. But because I was a male, and because the world is different, I have male privilege, even within the confines of African American Southern
patriarchal society.
Exactly. So we all have some sort of privilege, and I had the privilege of coming from a background where my parents, I didn't star, so but I know people who didn't have that privilege, right? They didn't have access to food and comforts the way that I do. So I feel like all of us can be heroes in a way. Jesus Christ, all about this world. So just to bring it back around to my aesthetic of good guys, bad guys, and knights in shining armor, standing up for people who can't stand up for themselves. Most of us can stand up for something. And if we're all standing up, we win, right? All right, I'm going to get real socialist over here in a minute. Because there's no war but the class war. Never forget that.
Can you repeat that? There's no what?
I didn't hear the last thing.
You just said something. There was no something. I did not get the last thing you said.
Oh, no war but class war.
Interesting. Let's expand on that a little bit more, because I know we're talking about writing, and I know all this because right now the tone of what is going on globally, you have the racism, the injustice, you have all these different dimensions that people are exploring. But you just touched on there's no war but class war. Let's expand on that just a little. We're not going to go in full detail, but
I'd like to hear what
Forever.
Molly says.
Just give you something. No?
I'd like to hear.
That's okay. A lot of people will probably disagree with you on that there's no war but class war. But I think it is the root. Let's be honest. Pick a country. Okay, the start, the origin of all of it, and the most prominent countries that are still, how do I say, really deep in class war, I would say it's America, obviously, largely parts of India, even China, and right now, well, let's be honest, China owns the world, and they have one of the largest class warfare going on. Okay, it literally is the rich versus the poor, but that's pretty much always been the same thing. Wherever you go, it's the have and the have not, and as trivial as it might sound to boil it down to that, if you look at what Cleve was touching on earlier as far as privilege and the underprivileged, it has always been the poor. And I don't know that there's any way to sugarcoat that. So yeah, we have to be our own superheroes, Cleve, right on.
And
I agree.
even within our community, you know, there's classism, there's colorism, you know.
Oh God, don't get into that. That's a whole other I don't have the extra hour.
So I just really think that once we come to understand solidarity and that, listen, you know, working people, we have to stand together and put aside all that other bullshit. Y'all can fight in the streets about religion or politics, whatever, you know, political parties. But as working people, we have to freaking stand together. That's the only way we're going to stop a lot of this atrocity that's going on.
Do you think that there could be a coming together? When I say a coming together, we, as a whole, we set ourselves apart from each other, whether it be by color. And in the Black community, like you just said, it's colorism. Very recently, a huge debate as to which one of the Destiny's Childs were more talented, being not Beyonce, but she did get a leg up because she appealed more to the white American audience. And as much as that is horrible to say, it is the reality. But we separate ourselves within our own groups. So I don't really know that we are in any position to come together without at least first agreeing that it even exists.
Well, you know, circumstances often make up people's minds for it. And I think with this idiot we have in the White House now, and just the type of, here's what I've been saying for 10 years. What we have can't sustain itself. So a Donald Trump was going to happen one way or another. Now, when a system gets that loaded at the top, and I'm talking about sort of, you know, socio-economically speaking, when you have so much at the top and so little at the bottom, it's just going to collapse on itself. And if it hadn't have been Donald Trump and coronavirus, it would have been, you know, coronavirus and another war. It would have been something that would have been put too much stress on the system. So I think what you're seeing now, like, I'm sorry, I'm not going to talk too much. I know I'm blabbering but like in when you look at a place like freaking Portland, and you have an army of white people shouting Black Lives Matter, that's the kind of solidarity that's not going to come through everything being normal. That's the kind of solidarity that comes from enough is enough. And half those motherfuckers would have been, I'm so sorry, guys. I'm so sorry. Half those people, they'd be at work anyway if it wasn't for the coronavirus. No matter how much they say Black Lives Matter, they can post it on social media all day, but they had to have their asses at work before this virus came along. So it's that kind of strain to the system that's going to force class solidarity if we don't bring it about ourselves. And I thought we were going to talk about screenplays today. How did we get all the way from here?
I think
wait, assuming the solidarity with Blacks, and that's great as whites as a whole being in solidarity with Blacks. But one of the things I think I would love to address is that this is not an issue that, okay, it could be solved by being in solidarity with Blacks. This is something that is solved by admitting and addressing that this is a white issue. And I'm not really sure that there's a politically correct way to say that. When you're protesting the tearing down of representations of slavery and stuff like that, and to keep it in perspective, somebody once said to me that if you go to Germany and you see statues of Hitler everywhere, would you be actually going, it's just to remind us of how we've effed up and we can't do that. I don't know actually say this is our issue, because very recently a congressman said slavery was a necessity, it was a necessary evil.
Yeah,
which I could never really wrap my head around, because it's counterproductive. You can't call it a necessary evil and then still say, yeah, but we did this, we need to fix it. Being in solidarity with Blacks and people of color is one thing, it's great, yeah, and it hopefully will help it, but you have to admit that this is a white issue. And if you don't address it in the white community.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I would argue that a part of being in solidarity with Black people is to acknowledge that this is a white issue and to address it within their community. So when people ask me, how can I, well, please, what can I do? Go talk to your people. And you know the people I'm talking to, because your face turned red, you keep your mouth shut, but your face turned red when they start talking that shit at the dinner table. So you know who I'm talking about. That's who you, some of them will actually do that. Just like, you know, let's talk about, you know, when we can talk about any of the ills that plague the Black community that you just spoke of. Some people are going to take it upon themselves. So you could be at church and somebody says something off color about LGBT, and you say, listen, you know, I'm not gonna, that's not cool, man. You know, it doesn't matter if I know anybody like that or if I'm like that. But we're all one people, and we need to leave all that mess back behind. Or you can, however you want to you know, hit the person to their bias, however you want to phrase that. So the onus is always on us to make the changes within our communities. That starts with making the changes for yourself, of course, which I know sounds like some hippy BS, but it's true. You have to.
It's a burden for artists to carry.
Yes. Hey, somebody would love to hear somebody else talk.
That's okay.
Okay, sure. We'll seg right back to that one.
I like it.
Way back. What you're talking about is somewhat kind of.
It's never Imelda's question, the struggles of being a Black woman producer in the industry. Look at it this way. I had to start my own production company and literally produce my own stuff, film my own stuff. It helped that I could also come up with my own material. It was absolutely tremendous being a writer first, because you can come up with the raw materials. But the one thing that I will say, your reputation gets there before you do in this industry, the filmmaking industry, because 6 degrees of separation, maybe even 4 degrees of separation. Okay, people you've worked with in the past that are now professional work, and finding not so easy a Black woman, there's really so few. I remember next to there were 3 of us in a room of about maybe 125 people. And it's kind of the idea of being a Black face in white space. Then you know, it's not just about you being a Black face, even though that's the first status that everyone will see. Hopefully your reputation will speak for itself. But it always will be a struggle. There's no getting around it.
And Molly, that's what I wanted to touch on with you, because you went from, when we spoke previously, you went from having your book as an author and exploring the whole refugee stuff that your film is all about. And I want to talk about that transition from being an author. I know you went back to film school, and I know you also did another project on the LGBT in the military. But I also wanted to talk about writing something completely different from the story-like setup to now telling a documentary story. What is the difference in the way you are as an author versus that of a filmmaker, and what are some of the takeaways that people out there who are looking to make that transition? What are some of the takeaways that are just some quick little tips that you can give to individuals looking in?
position for being a writer,
I'm not sure if it's correct.
a poetry writer to be a screenplay writer. One is literally not literal. It's everything is almost figurative, and then suddenly you're going from figurative to active. The most difficult thing was making sure that you're all about, staying active when you're writing a screenplay. But I will say, if you're a writer, it's not going to be something that won't be, it's not, because you have to structure your story in a way that is completely contrary to, say, for example, being a novelist or something like that. Everything else is different. It's upended. And the one thing that I do know about being a writer, I read a lot. I think if you're going to be a writer, you have to be a reader, okay? Because if you're not, then the stories are not going to come as naturally or as easy. It's one thing to go out there and try to experience as much as you can, but if you actually don't know what you're identifying with or have any understanding of it, I don't know how much of a writer you're going to be. But I love writing. I say if I wasn't a writer, I would need so much therapy.
That's a nice way of putting it. No, because it's a way of escaping also. And
you step up for yourself for however long it takes. Hopefully you won't have bad back issues, but
Exactly. 𝗠𝗲𝗆, you said your experience is something completely different. Your process and your journey of getting here. I know you're also a professor. So what are some of the tips that you have that you give to your students who are aspiring writers, or script writers, I should say?
I would give this advice to any writer. First of all, you have to write every day, whenever you can, and to a script writer, I would say read about writing scripts, focus on structure, and always remember that there are three. I call them 𝗠𝗲𝗆's 3 C's of storytelling: conflict, character, and climax. So if you have a compelling conflict, story is conflict, and characters that are not boring, and you give your audience a bang for their buck ending, then you have a story. The rest of it is gonna flesh itself out in rewrites if you're really committed to doing what you're doing. I hope I answered your question.
Somewhat. Yeah. No, because the thing that you find, because there is limited limited wording that you can do when you're doing screenwriting, whereas with a novel you have to be more expressive and you have to let the audience feel the story. In script writing, it's a different style. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of people feel that it's an easy transition from being an author to being that. And you're seeing some of the complications at times, and people do not realize that you have to be less descriptive in script writing.
everything is active. Because everything is happening now. So yeah.
Go ahead, Mark.
Well, with script writing, everything is happening now, here, in this moment. And you don't necessarily need as much descriptive words. You might have the scene description before each dialogue scene, but it has to be super, super active. And I don't know that there's little room for interpretation in script writing. It is,
Exactly. What I would say is writing a script is like you're making a map, whereas writing a novel or a poem, that's like you're a tour guide. You're actually
nice.
So you're giving all the juicy details. You're setting up narratives about so and so was murdered in this house and yada yada yada. But if you're writing a script, you're just writing. It's a map for somebody else to decide how they're
figure it out. Mm-hmm.
I like that. I like that way of putting it, because then it simplifies it so people can actually see that. Because sometimes I think we have a bad habit of trying to be overly descriptive. I know that, and then your script gets into the hand of a producer, and they're like, we don't have time to read all this. Go back and start doing your research and getting it down there. And how important is it for people to have other eyeballs on their script before it's being finalized. Because many times you're doing your project and you're like, oh, I'm not going to share it with anyone because I have that award-winning script in my hands and I'm going to keep my story to myself. But how do you, what are some of your suggestions regarding that, of allowing other people to see your work before, and how do you protect yourself?
Copyright, okay? It's very easy. You get online, you copyright. It's so important to get eyes on it, because perspective is one thing from your perspective. And if you're writing it about the story altogether, then it's so key to have other eyes on it.
Molly, I'm not sure if you're hearing me, but your audio is kicking in and out. Because we're not hearing. No, we're hearing you clearly. Yes. Okay. So can you repeat what you're saying about the eyeballs and copywriting, because that's a very intricate detail.
If you're worried about it being stolen, it's very easy to copyright. It's literally one stroke online. Copyright search engine, very easy. But it's key to get eyeballs on it, because before it even lands in somebody's professional hands, somebody who's actually taking it, and it's so easy for them to dismiss it if it's not up to par. Okay, they don't even think twice. They could go to the first page and you're seeing the search and you're so not on point, dismiss it immediately, regardless of what the rest is going to be. So it's key to have as many eyeballs as possible. The film I was actually supposed to be filming later this year. A friend of mine wrote it as a screenplay, and it turned into this quiet little profound film. And one of the things I loved about it is that
we're not hearing you clearly. You're breaking up.
I have no idea why I am.
Okay. Cleve, if you can go ahead and chime in on that part of it, and Molly, I'll send you a text. Probably sign back in and see if this will help with your connection. Cleve, what about your thought process on having other eyeballs on your work before?
Everything Molly said is 100%. So if you are worried about somebody stealing your work, it's easy enough to copyright it. I'm going to tell you, nobody wants to steal your little screenplay. And ideas can't be stolen, right? So if it's a great idea, that's wonderful, but nobody sells ideas. You know, I often hear people say stuff like, "Oh, it's a great idea, it's worth blah blah blah." Nobody gives a fuck. I'm sorry, nobody cares about that. They need the screenplay. I mean, every movie, good or bad, started as a great idea. But you want to have eyes on it. You want to have, if you can join a critique group and actually find people who are going to commit to it, and show up and do that sort of stuff, it's invaluable. Because there's things you're not seeing as the writer, especially if you're a new writer. You know, you're not objective, and you understand what it is you're trying to communicate. But you want other people to make sure you're effectively communicating that before you give your script to somebody who's going to give it literally what you said, one page. These people are swamped with screenplays. They're looking for a reason to throw it away. And if they tell you to put it on blue paper and you put it on green paper, you're going to chuck it in the trash without reading it. Don't try to get cute and none of that. Just be straightforward and write your thing. You know, follow the rules, because if you don't, your stuff's not going to get read.
Molly, now you're back. Maybe you can just recap on what you were saying so the audience can hear you clearly from your point of view.
Yeah, a lot of people don't like to send their first draft or any of their drafts, quite frankly, just out to anyone. But it's easy to copyright it. Copyright search they don't even have to be in the film business. They don't have to be writers, okay? If they're readers, it actually helps. So I think the key is to get as many eyeballs on it as possible, especially if it's not something that is about your life or what you're doing, because you're writing not for somebody else's perspective. but in your words. It helps to get other people to take a look at it. I have a habit of sending my screenplays to all of my previous professors. Because at least you have that perspective, okay? They're going to be coming from an accurate writer's perspective and a storytelling perspective, some of them, and they can tell you. I have one of my favorite, he will tell me,
oh my God. You're in the middle of saying something so important, and your audio again is messing up. But I remember that myself. So as part of my own processes in doing the things, after I do my first draft, I tend to associate myself with other groups and have table reads and all these things, because what you're hearing in your voice and in your head is completely different from how other people are receiving it, and especially if it's actors or just hearing your words being read back to you from different voices. So that makes a huge difference. And especially if you are writing something that you're a genre that you're not completely versed in, it's always good to have some level of feedback from other groups, because I am all about finding support groups to share my work with and have my work critiqued, because I would say a perfectionist, but I'm super obsessive about my work, and it's never good enough to be released, and sometimes I just have to let it go. And I think by having that kind of feedback from people, it helps you to move things along rather than being stuck.
Also, the critique process of reading other people's stuff and trying to find a constructive way for them to make it better. That's an invaluable experience as a writer also.
Agreed. Somebody mentioned format. Format is key when you're writing a screenplay, absolutely. Because if you don't have it in the correct format, they won't even pick it up.
That's right. I'm rewriting some of the script now.
What are some of the tools? What are some of the tools? What are some of the tools available for screenwriters? Mm-hmm.
You have free formats, screenwriting formats. The one I've always used is Final Draft because it's the one I'm most comfortable with. And it still is, for me, the most reliable. It's not free, at least not that I'm aware of, but you can upgrade for less. If you buy the Final Draft now, let's say $2.99, you can upgrade when this one expires for a lot less and stuff like that. But it's more reliable in my opinion, so that's what I've always used.
Can I weigh in on Final Draft?
Oh God, go ahead. Come on, let's have it.
No, you're absolutely right. If you're going to be a screenwriter, you need to invest in Final Draft. That said, F Final Draft. Because they're pricey. They have a monopoly on the business. Listen, I'm telling you to get Final Draft not just because it's going to deal with all your formatting BS, but that's what from what I can see, that's the industry standard. Like if you show anything else, like when they start emailing you scripts or whatever, if your stuff isn't in Final Draft, it's like not having email. It's like not having Microsoft Word or something, right?
Oh God, I know. They dismiss it so easily.
What'd you say?
They do dismiss it quite easily if it's not in certain formats.
So you got to do what you got to do.
And that's just the key. Andrea said, as a cap to this response, could Cleve or Molly suggest a reputable source for young, naive writers to copyright their work?
Yeah, I'm actually looking now. I'm spazzing on it, but
so I know while you're doing this, Molly, and trying to decide on that part of it, I know here in the U.S. or in New York here, you can register your script with the Writers Guild as a way of copywriting it. That way, if you're sending it out to individuals, at least you have that as some kind of barrier and protection. Another way in which you can do that is possibly registered with, and you chime in and let me know what you guys think about this, is also the copyright company, organization in Washington. Like, you send that and you copyright your work as some way of having some level of protection while you're sending it out. Because as a writer, as a new writer and a novice writer, you're so eager to have some level of breakthrough in the industry, and you might be lured into a lot of the what do you call those things, as the competitions out there, that people are saying, hey, submit your screens, submit your work. And if you're not protecting yourself before that, you might just be out, because what's happening, your story is unprotected. And you can never now defend yourself, because you may just see your film in a different form out there that is being produced. But if you keep tabs of who you're sending your work out to, the dates in which you're sending your work out to, and you have that protection, at least if there's any kind of affiliation that is attached to your work later on that is being out there in the wide world, versus that you can go back now and check your records and see what's happening. That's my take on what I understand about the copywriting issue. In the Caribbean, I believe there are the copyright industries in Trinidad and Jamaica that people can now look into how to go about copywriting their work in the Caribbean just as well, because it's very important to do so.
When I was, this was a lifetime, when I was first writing screenplays, you could mail yourself a copy of your script.
That's a poor man's copyright. You're right.
And the poor man's copyright. Yes.
But now it's so easy. What you said, you can register with the Library of Congress. You can. I always advise people, just because it's good for writers, to work with the Writers Guild if you can. So you can, if you can cough up a couple of bucks, you can get your stuff protected.
Yeah. So for me, I enjoy using Trademark Engine because they do all of the work for you. But I still mail myself a copy unopened. It's just kind of nice to have that little backup in case something doesn't go through. Because that date is always on the stamp. No one.
You know what? I love it. I'm gonna make that a character trait.
No, that is amazing. I cannot.
But Trademark Engine does.
From a Caribbean perspective. Got you. I'm not sure if that applies to like the Caribbean region as well, or if it's an international protection that is offered. So people out there would have to look into that to see if that covers it. But one of the things that I can suggest is, if you are in the Caribbean, reach out to your local film commissioner and those governing bodies to see what are some of the procedures that are in place regarding copywriting your work before you send it out, because it is very, ooh, we have a little glitch right there. It is very critical for us to do it in that manner. So you have to do your homework just the same. Nikki Mo said, what was the biggest hurdle you had to overcome from being a novelist to a scriptwriter?
Oh, that one's for you, Cleve.
Oh, well, screenwriting is boring. I mean, the whole reason I went from screenwriting to novels is, like I said, I really wanted to tell a story. I wanted to be the tour guide, and you know, not the map maker. So when you've been the tour guide, it's really kind of, you know, it's kind of mundane to go back to just making maps.
I mean, it is a little clinical script writing. Yeah, I have to agree. No more personal flourishes. All of that is for novelists. In screenwriting, everything is clinical.
Yep. Thank you. Whoa, that was really good. I'm totally going to use that.
No, this is not
clinical, man. Yeah. And so I mean, you may have gathered I'm a person who is moved by my passion. So clinical is just not working for me, man. like my first couple of rewrites for a screenplay would be cutting out all the F words and then cutting out all the fun words that I put in for myself, you know.
And then they'd have this speech, huh?
Yeah, and then you just have this very clinical document. But see, I started writing screenplays because I wanted to make movies. So it was always my intention. I don't think I ever wrote a screenplay just of my own volition that I didn't intend to direct. I've only directed one or two.
Okay. So from my perspective, I am not a published author, whether it's poetry, otherwise drama, or anything like that. Yes. I've worked on white papers. That's as far as it went, because maybe I was not too disciplined enough to take the time to really take the amount of energy to do a actual book per se. But in the processes of developing the script, my background is in documentary filmmaking, which is a different style of writing compared to the narrative writing. So you have two different styles in doing certain things, and depending on the type of documentary that you're doing in writing. Molly, I know you worked on your documentary. Were you also the writer for your documentary? And how did that shift, or what did that look like? Because you came from the space of poetry into writing. And I know you also do narrative writing, but for a documentary writer, what does that look like?
There's a reason I'm never going to do another documentary. It was by far one of the most difficult things I've ever done, because especially the content, you're taking somebody else's life, somebody else's real life, and you're adapting it essentially into a version that is going to be palatable to an audience. The worst thing about that is how easily you could mess that up. So I found myself putting the story together as far as filming first, and then writing out how I want to tell that story. It just so happens that I didn't have to do that much different, because exactly as we filmed it was pretty much how I presented it. This is not an easy subject matter, my documentary. As a matter of fact, it was one of the worst things to experience, because the stories that are coming out of these people, and you have to write it accurately so that it's not preachy and you're not beating anybody over the head with any sort of moral compass, okay? And you can't press meaning into the mundane. You have to just let it speak for itself. I found with documentary, if you let it speak for itself, hopefully it'll actually be able to tell it a lot better than any sort of, non-fiction would. Or it was very difficult. I don't know that I would be doing another one, because even after filming was finished, it still took a while to write it out exactly how I wanted it to be told.
But we also have to make this point very clear, because for documentaries, you have to be able to create the treatment, and we have to allow investors to see the entire film, that you don't know what it's going to look like on paper before you can actually shoot the film, if you're getting the funding. And then you have to rewrite the film after it's shot.
So that's one thing it has in common with regular fiction writing. It's the fact that there's three versions. There's the one that you write, there's the one you film, there's the one you're going to cut afterwards. So with documentary, even after I wrote it out first, even after having the treatment first, what we actually filmed was in many ways drastically different than what I wrote. So having to rewrite it after the fact was not an easy thing to do, because again, you have an idea of the story you want to tell, which is what you write out in the treatment. But documentaries, you have no control in documentaries. I have a feeling that saying to you that, in documentaries, God is your everything, because everything is contingent on a lot of luck, because so much is out of your control. And which, by the way, is not something I'm very good at. But there's a lot that's out of your control as a documentarian. And you, Meschida, I swear, I'm not even sure if you're because that's your thing, and I commend you for it, but I don't know that I would be doing that again. It was just too unpredictable. Everything was too nuts. And the good thing is, it's like having your own production company. So I didn't have to go through somebody else. And I think having that control is probably the one saving grace. Because if you didn't, you're completely dependent on the persons or the production company that you're falling into afterwards. They have control. Even after you write the treatment, they decide how they want to tell it. You have very little control. It's
and I think as a I agree. I agree with the point that you're raising because it is something. And as a writer, you have to also be able to stick firm. You have to be flexible on one hand, but you also have to be very firm as far as putting your foot down when you are now negotiating your thing, because your story can easily be distorted depending on the negotiations that is happening between you and that producer or production company that is taking your script. So there is so much to be discussed when coming to this, that an hour is not even enough time to kind of really unpack all of the different elements in this. But the most I can say as far as the documentary, my experiences with documentary versus that of fiction, because I've dabbled in both. I've dabbled in the fiction writing and I've dabbled into the short film. Crystal, I actually wrote that part of it. But the documentary, it's a whole different something, because my friend and I are now co-producing our documentary, and she's from the fiction world. So she's all about, this is how we're going to be. And I'm like, honey, that's not how it is. It's more like, and she's like, well, I said, no, you cannot say what the character is going to say because you have no idea what you have no idea what character is going to say. So from that perspective, the time is going by so quickly, but Tilam said, this is a wonderful talk. I had to switch to my computer in order to chat. Hey, Meschida, your smile is...
Amazeballs.
I love it. Thank you so much. And Andrea said, could Cleve recommend a good resource for a novice author to use as a guide to writing outside of going to school, of course, as a professor? You have any feedback there, Cleve, that someone can look into?
Good question.
Yes. I'm going to try to answer a few questions. I would start with, if you're writing screenplays specifically, anything by Sid Field. Just for me, it really helped with structure because, I would have these great ideas and, because I come from theater, pretty good with dialogue, et cetera, but the actual structure of telling a story is a real thing. We all innately we know how to do it, but when we go to do it, we F it up all the time. Our heads get in the way.
Yeah.
So I would, Sid Field, if whatever you want to write, read. To become a novelist, I spent like 2 years. I just gorged myself on all sorts of fiction, and until like literally that was my life. It became like
no, you have to be a reader if you're going to be a writer. It's plain and simple.
You have to be consumed with it. Yes.
So read the people you like, and figure out why you like them. Also, develop your own voice. If you're reading a lot of a certain author, especially as a novice writer, you're going to sort of take on their voice aspect sometimes. That's okay. You're going to write through it, as long as you write through it. Because you're going to, this is all part of developing your own voice, I believe.
I swear I was a female.
That is a very good point. That's a very good point you raised, Cleve, because for me personally, I do follow what you've just suggested, like reading the genres and getting yourself immersed into that. But then at the same time, when I know I'm getting into that space of writing, I don't read anything. I don't look at any films because I don't want to get that influences that I am now thinking is my own voice, but it's not, because it's something that I am replicating from what I see. So you have to have that period. That's from my process anyway, where I kind of separate those things, because I do not want my work to just be a repetition of somebody else's voice that is in my subconscious.
See, for me, I use other art to sort of fuel my own. So, and I'm at the point now where my voice is so specifically mine. It doesn't matter who I'm reading, writing, whatever. It's gonna, I may borrow some words or phraseology from somebody, but it's gonna be Cleve when it hits the page. When it hits the page, it's all me, baby.
Got you. Oh my God, we're right there at the curse. Molly, what is your take on that as far as
everybody who's a writer have heard write what you know, and I found that to be very limiting. almost restrictive. So the challenge for me is writing what you don't know. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're writing from somebody else's perspective, but it helps to do the research so you have a better understanding of what it is that you are trying to write, because it's something you don't know. It's easy to fall into another writer's perspective. For example, there was a while there where, I was almost a female James Baldwin, but that's another story. It's it's very, very easy to put somebody else's perspective, take their words and put it in your head and have that turn into yours. But at the same time, it's good to read other writers and find your voice through theirs. And you don't have to agree with them to find your voice through theirs. But write what you don't know. Writing what you know is fine. It's probably very easy. But the challenge is to writing what you don't know and finding your voice in it.
Write what you want to know.
Write what you want to know. I love that. So on that note, we are right up onto the hour. Any closing remarks or any closing advice that you can give anyone looking at, like I said again, to transition from being either a novice, a novel writer, an author, into script writing, and or the other way around? Two feedback. Cleve, let's go with you.
I'm going to answer Andrea's question about the structure of a novel. There's a lot of stuff on the internet about that. For me, I still use, the reason why I recommend Sid Field is because even for novels, the way he structures a story is so dead on that it is the foundation for structuring everything. So I work in the 3-act structure.
Okay. And Molly, what are some of the closing remarks that you can give anyone looking on right now as far as style or any advice you can give regarding closing out?
So if you're trying to break into screenplay, most companies don't accept unsolicited, and you can't get an agent or a manager without at least getting your foot in the door. There's lots of opportunities out there. There's lots of, what's the word I'm looking for? Okay, you don't need to be a member of, for example, a lot of the IFP functions. You can just literally sign up. You can get the newsletter. You can get invitations. You can network. There's a lot of things you can do to get your foot in the door. Okay, don't let that whole, I don't have representation, it's unsolicited, because once you get that one little toe in the door, that's pretty much all you'll need. So start networking, very, very simple.
Networking is gold.
Networking is gold. For the people who are looking on regarding that is not within the US, IFP is Independent Filmmakers Project. Yes, and then they also have an international arm where they have every year they solicit films from across the world. So it is a very good resource platform for you to kind of become familiar with. There's a lot of online resources that they provide. So it's a really nice space to join.
And you don't have to buy into it, at least not unless you want to.
Exactly. Some of it is free, some of it is membership based. So that is a very nice resource for you to start looking into. And I know that every single country within the Caribbean have, like I said before, their own film commission or cultural center that is dealing to promote the film industry within that respective country. I know Jamaica is doing an amazing job. Barbados have it. There are a lot of different communities that is being now developed in Grenada that is providing these resources. Trinidad has a huge industry. So you can look internally within your own country and see what's there, network with other filmmakers within the region, and just ask for help, because most times we are willing to assist. Like, I'm from that school where it's about collaboration. I'm not going to read a 150-page script, but at the same time, if you come with, hey, give me a little bit of your feedback, let me rephrase that. I will read a 150-page script as part of my consultation, but from the perspective of just being someone who can nurture you, I would read a shorter version of it and give you some feedback. So that is completely different. I respect that process. Any final word? Because I'm about to close off. You laughed when I said that, but it's the truth.
Yeah.
Like you said, be your own superhero.
Also, we were talking, Anselm, we were talking about
breaking up, Cleve.
final draft
Right.
software. That's what we were talking
You can
about.
just research it online. It's just Final Draft. You can just research it online and
Yeah,
you
just go to their website.
You can just do a Google search and you can get that. Thank you so much. Before we leave, 𝗠𝗲𝗏 said, check out film. Let's see, one last thing. Check out the film great online resource. 𝗑𝗲𝗆 for screenplay contests and resources. Exactly. Do your research. Google is your best friend right now. Finding different platforms that can supply you with ways to go from being a novice into something more, like we said before, it's about networking, it's about joining different writers group. And you have to be very careful as far as those writers group that you're joining in. Maybe there are some NDAs that people sign and stuff like that, because it's all about that whole collaborative spirit. And you never know if you can find your next producer or director within those groups that can help you take your film or your concept from script writing into an actual film. So you have to look at it from a holistic point of view. What is your full intentions? What do you want for your own project? And that's that. So again, I want to say thank you everyone for spending your hour with us. How can people find you guys before we leave very quickly? Molly, follow you? Because I know we all are so horrible when coming to
We're getting better. I have the Instagram.
So tell the people right now, Molly, how they can find you.
So 𝗠𝗏𝗃 pretty much on any of the platforms. That's my full name, and that's all you need to know. It's the same on all of the boards. Happy hunting.
Thank you. And what about you, Cleve?
First, I just want to say it was really great to meet you, Marley.
Oh, and absolutely.
Meschida, is always good to hang out with you. The best way to reach me, I guess, would be through Instagram, s.moonlight at Instagram, but the light is LITE. Most of the writing I'm doing today is teacher stuff and another novel I'm working on. So all of my writer stuff is boring. You can go look in stuff I posted a year ago. But so mostly I'm pursuing this art thing as my creative outlet these days. So.
Nice. Nice. And again, I would like to say thank you again, everyone, for chiming in today. As I mentioned at the onset of the show today, 𝗠𝗏𝗃𝗏 Film Festival actually is launching today. We are doing a virtual or hybrid festival in October. So I'm so excited about that. I am putting in my plug, yes. Please follow us on social media platforms to get more information as we roll it out. 𝗠𝗏𝗃𝗏filmfestival.com. That's it across the platforms. And we do look forward to having the opportunity to bring amazing storytelling from diverse filmmakers from within the Grenada, the Caribbean region, and the African diaspora to share with the community in October. Until then, please remain safe, everyone, and see you next week for another edition of Chime In. To my guests, my panelists today, Cleve and Molly, thank you so much for spending your Sunday afternoon with me.
It was so much fun.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. I love this.
Thank you. And then we shall see you again next week. Bye.
Yep.